welcome to another webinar in the series of webinars that PIDE has been hosting since the last few years, in which we garner diverse point of views on important issues that relate to our socio-economic milieu. Today's webinar is no different. It's on an important topic. It's the future of public education in Pakistan. And we have with us Zulfiqar Qazilbash, who is Education Technology Advisor, Ministry of Federal Education and Professional Training. Then we have Mahmood, who is CEP, Knowledge Platform. And other than that, we have Haroon Yasin, who is CEO, Taleemabad. So without further ado, I would invite Zulfiqar Qazilbash to go ahead with his presentation.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. So this is an introduction to the National Digital and Innovation in Education Strategy. So this is work that the ministry has done over the last 1.5 years. And this is what we plan to implement over the next, it'll give us direction to implement our programming for the next 5 years or longer. So we are trying to change from the yearly programming cycle into a 5-year programming cycle. And this is part of that, part of that effort. So I think the problems of public education are well known to everyone. The public education system is performing. It is underperforming. It's focused on teaching rote learning and facing severe execution challenges. And I'm not going to bore you here with the numbers, but part of the problem is that the current system is administered on an output basis. So we are concerned with how many teachers we are training. We are concerned with how many kids we are putting in schools. We are tracking those numbers, but we are not looking at the outcomes that are achieved and the long-term impact that comes out of education. So we are trying. So this strategy is essentially an attempt to change all of that and to put incentives and controls in the system and move it towards outcome and impact monitoring so that there is continuous annual focus on improving the quality of education across the system. When we are talking about equity, we're talking about access. We should not forget about the fundamental thing that we keep on need to improve the quality of learning that the system is imparting. That is the most important thing. So while we are doing this, we did research, extensive research on other models of education all over the world. And, the world of education, the K-12 education specifically is what we are talking about here, has gone through tremendous technology transformation in the last 20 or 30 years. Education is, if you are, over 50 like me, then the education that is going on as best practice today is very different than what we learned during our time, right? Education as far as technology in the classroom is concerned has gone from computer labs to smart classes, and now it's smart classes and innovation labs, and most of the study done on the internet outside the class. So this is how education is evolving. It requires skills among the students, where essentially it used to be computer science students only got into the computer studies. Then it went to basic computer skills were required, digital literacy were required to study for all subjects. And now it's getting into where, you are able to get on the internet through apps and find your own, educational content. So things have changed quite a lot as far as global best practices are concerned with technology. Also with the pedagogy, the teacher-centered learning is going towards autonomous learning, and behaviorist pedagogy is going towards, constructive pedagogy, which means that, fundamental what the role of the teacher is becoming different, right? Whereas it was a specialized subject skill, now it's becoming more like a learning manager. And so we have to account for, if we want to, not fall behind in education rankings and stuff, we have to, look at both pedagogical reform and technological reform. One is not enough. What has happened, which is, becoming a major driver of reform within the public education system is coronavirus. So coronavirus forced digitalization into the system. So when children were sitting at home, they had no means to study other than with a smartphone or through TV or radio programming. So digital was a necessary thing that we had to do if you were to have any education done in these 2 years at all. So when we have put together this distance learning initiative consisting of TV and internet, we also learned that we need a program beyond just the school closures for people to recover from learning losses. We can also use the same infrastructure to supplement school learning and allow the out of school children a pathway back to school. So all these things became interesting. So we decided to study, what we can do with digital technology in more detail. And we came up with 7 things which completely changed how we looked at education. The first one is access. For free, for very little cost, we can centralize, and transmit and broadcast content all over to the 90 million children for virtually very, very low cost, right? This was not possible before because you had to print textbooks, you had to worry about logistics and all of that. Then teacher support. With the internet, we can reach teachers on their phone all the time. So it is possible now to have continuous professional development for them and do these kind of things which were very expensive to do through cascade trainings. Pedagogical transformation. We have the ability, since we are controlling the content that we provide teacher, we can also through distance learning, provide them with lesson plans and things like that. So we can go from rote learning to 21st century learning. Individualized learning, because now we have the ability to have statistics on every student or every teacher. So we can create individualized learning pathways for them, which we can use to further improve our education. Community engagement, we can do system-wide surveys through the phones, assessment, digital alerts, so we can get parents and much of a wider learning community involved with education. Performance focus, again, analytics gives us, before we used to have impact studies, years later to be able to understand the impact. Now we can get continuous feedback during the intervention. So this is a drastic change in our ability to monitor and evaluate the system and make ongoing changes. So we don't have to wait for programs to end. We can sort of change them in the middle if they're not working. Partnerships, edtech is technology. It gives us ability to tap into the IT industry in a big way and orient them towards edtech industry, towards edtech goals. So, those are all the major advantages of digital technology. The downside is, of course, financing. All this costs extra money, and Pakistan already has a problem with finance. So how are we going to do that? So our strategy also looks for answers to that question. Fundamental question that the strategy tries to address is, will edtech help learning? I mean, edtech is great, but not every edtech works, right? It is a marriage between pedagogy and technology. You have to get the mix right in order for have to impact. So there is always going to be risk associated with that. We felt we did not have the capacity to be able to undertake that risk ourselves. So we created a private public partnership model in which we are trying to pass on some of that risk to the private sector. So both of us are invested in the success of every intervention. So the value of private public partnership, World Bank, everybody has written a lot about it. With the right design, it is possible to have quite high quality education at low cost. So it's not about always that you involve the private sector and your costs will increase. It's you work according to the theory of comparative advantages, where the government uses its skills of administration, monitoring and evaluation and research, whereas it leverages the private sector's knowledge, skills and resources, which it does not have. And through this combination, you can get to greater efficiencies by focusing on outcomes rather than processes. And you can share risk with the private sector, so they get compensated when things work and they take the risk when the implementation is not working. So, it's an opportunity for us to provide an opportunity and orient the edtech industry towards public education, and we are going at it in a big way. So the government has, what is distance learning? It's primarily 2 major initiatives, and they're both needed, right? One is the TV initiative. So we are launching 6 channels. We already have PEMRA permission for 4, and we are getting one through a partner CSR, but 6 TV channels of education. India has 28. We have We only had partial, programming during coronavirus, but we never had a government TV channel. So now we're going to have 6, and we are going to, have set up a facility with a partnership with Allama Iqbal Open University, where we are going to build a satellite uplinking system, and we also have labs there that are going to media labs and resources there that help program this 6 channels, which we are going to broadcast over satellite TV and also internet apps. Then we have eTaleem, which is an internet learning library where people can learn, access it to learn anytime, anywhere. Eventually, it will become a virtual school, but now it's an offline library. Both of these are needed because some people need the TV, the guided structure of the TV programming, that it happens at 3 o'clock, structured learning. So we think it is a good solution for the out of school children and the weaker or less motivated students. Also, channels can be used for public discourse and engagement. It's sort of a shame that we spend more time on infotainment and less time on serious issues like education, but we hope to change that. And then eTaleem, the internet library, is going to be a good resource to teachers for mainstream students in schools who can, learn to study on their own, the sort of the gifted students. So the programs themselves, these are, we're not just going to throw programming out there and let everybody figure it out, but there is research, there is community mobilization, parent orientation, regional and national competitions, as well as certifications and accreditations, which are going to be, certified by the government. So all of these things are going to drive, this system into, first of all, engagement, and then into learning outcomes, right? So you have outcomes, are not just engagement. We also understand that distance learning for us is 4 different things. Some rural communities will still use paper solutions. That's a small number. Then others will be, accessible through radio and TV solutions. And then, some, private sector specifically, we have, virtual learning classrooms. And most everybody, I think, that has technology will use the mobile app system. So we are looking at technology, how we deploy that. And we realize that the world is, especially the younger generation, is fastly moving towards mobile. So that is our most biggest initiative. And then, TV, although it's decreasing, viewership, and because the younger generation takes most of their primary information through the mobile, there is still a large enough population where, digital literacy is still very, very low. So we need that TV solution. So the mobile and the TV are going to be our major initiatives from the technology side. It's important, when people say, does everyone have internet in Pakistan? It's important to know that when you look at the PTA numbers, that 55% of the population has smartphones and, so on and so forth, you realize that 30% of our population is under 10. So effectively, the total market that is available for smartphones is 70% of the population, because typically parents don't allow, children under 10 years of age to have their phones. So they're going to access education through shared devices anyway. So, if you look at the picture, I think we are in late majority stage. If everybody understands, Geoffrey Moore's technology diffusion model, almost all our, population can be reached by smartphone. Perhaps some of them will require device subsidies. This is an example of the technology investment the ministry is doing. There is a learning management system, a school management system. There is systems for research and feedback. There is a content management system. There is an AI engine, big data servers. And basically, when it's all deployed, we'll have management reports, management dashboards, and eventually an EMIS system, engineering management information system, which will have every record available on the internet. So similar big, technology thing for the, TV broadcasting that we are doing at Allama Iqbal Open University. So there's a big investment to do this, to use technology to reach every nook and corner of Pakistan. In terms of programs, we've not been sitting idle. We have 2 streams. One is distance learning, in which we've already gone to the edtech sector and acquired the best available digital content. We are in the process of acquiring content for virtual teacher training, and we are moving as we speak towards an LMS and a data analytics engine. These are being developed right now. In school learning, we already have done a pilot to 60 schools, 200 classrooms in FTE where a private industry was deployed, solutions were deployed there. It's been there for about almost 2 years now. So we've had a blended learning experiment, which is getting ready to be scaled. Same thing with STEM. We've been experimenting in STEM labs in 30 schools. We've been having a positive experience. So we're also looking to scale that project. And we are moving towards scripted learning soon. There'll be announcements about that because we think that these are the kind of interventions we need to do. So these are things that are in the pipeline. One thing we realized that when we looked at distance learning and digital learning in schools, we noticed that a lot of the learning infrastructure is the same. The learning content can be applied in school, can be applied outside school. The learning assessments can be applied in school, out of school. The LMS can be designed to work in both situations. So this has given us the ability to have a centralized system and solution that reaches even into schools across Pakistan, those that want to work with us. We also realized that how we can use distance learning. We came up with 9 applications, right? The first one is we can use it to improve teacher performance by putting together a scripted learning program. Then we also can use it to address teacher availability, right? Through remote teaching to remote areas that don't have teachers. We can use accelerated to make up for the learning losses like occurred in coronavirus. We can use it to supplementary learning for children who don't understand their teachers in classrooms or want to study the subject harder. And then technology gives us a pathway for individualized learning, which may be a tall order. So initially it can be a pathway for remedial learning, gifted students, and special needs children, right? Different pathways, different content, different resources for them on the distance learning infrastructure. And then teacher and education staff professional development. We can have small 10-minute videos that teachers can look at, take the assessment and kind of go through a module, a certification module in their own time, which is much more effective and easier to do than getting them all together for cascade training as is currently done. So this allows, if you use our technology in the classroom, this is what happens, right? So technology allows children to be assessed early on. So, if somebody has problems, mental deficiencies or nutritional deficiencies or, problems engaging with learning, all of those could be normalized. Teachers, we can establish standards for them, which can be, assessed, their competency can be assessed, and we can provide them pathways to improve quality of teaching through distance education. And then content and materials can change at very low cost. It can be enhanced continuously. And so at a minimum, you get sort of this revised diagram, for the school, which is one stream is for classroom teaching and distance learning, which is, a mainstream thing. But then there is also another stream for remedial learning and for another for gifted students, and people can move back and forth with these streams at regular assessment points throughout the 12 years they're in school. So this is a very revolutionary model, which can, change education quite a bit. We've also, in the process of introducing a multi-level teacher certification program in which the teachers who are not motivated or who are struggling with their competency can start with the scripted lesson plans, but the ones who are more confident and want to excel in their profession can, go for higher certifications and modify these lesson plans. And the master teachers can even, create new lesson plans. So this is going to be an ordered thing. The advantage of this is that with scripted learning, you will have set a floor to teacher quality, right? So, the problem of, is the teaching well enough, good enough, that will be solved forever because you will have a floor to the teacher performance. This is what our vision is. Again, it's based on the theory of comparative advantage. government wants to be in service, doesn't want to be in service delivery. It wants to partner with the private sector. But what it does is it will have standards and policies and procedures for itself, and through regulation, some of it after consultation with them will also apply to private schools, private online ventures and training academies. But the bulk of the private sector, we will not get solutions for them, right? We will either they will solve an access problem for us, or an engagement problem for us, or a learning impact problem for us, or they will do research for us, or they will define the scope of what we are doing, right, by their innovations. But we will no longer talk to them as a technology provider, but more of a solution provider. And the vision is that all the children that go through through this system end up focused with an education which is more holistic than just the curriculum, right? It improves their lives. It teaches them how to work and collaborate in the community and make them better citizens. So it's not just knowledge and skills, but all these other things around that need to be provided to them. And you are going to see things like project-based learning, gamification, maker spaces, coding, robotics. These are basically vital ingredients of the future of work. So we are plan to put them into our public education system so that they don't lag behind the private sector too much, right? It's all about equity and giving everybody an equal chance. This is our private-public partnership. It's explained in greater detail in the strategy, but the main thing is there is a very specialized wing in the ministry that will, implement the strategy. It will work closely with a center of excellence that we will set up at university that wants to work with us initially. The university will be the brains of this whole journey. It will provide the research agenda. It will set standards of learning. It will also, work on capacity building of this whole ecosystem. So we have the MED BED program, but there are all these champions like the volunteer system, the NGOs, the social workers, and all of that. So we need them to define the curriculum, define the capacity, help us with that, and eventually there'll be incubations of new technology, new solutions that will be focused towards these children. So all of this, as I mentioned, will require an alternative finance framework. We don't expect to do this completely within the allocated budget. We are going to have a plan put in place where gradually we at least try to increase our funding significantly. So we are going to do that feasibility this year to see how we can pull together all the funding, all the sponsorships, all the SDG funding that is available. I mean, there's $100 billion of funding that is available to the best proposals. So we are going to go after those proposals by promising them that we are going to focus on learning impact and learning outcomes, which is a very, very big shift for us. Again, the evolution of edtech is that the industry also has to evolve with the times. Whereas, 10 years ago, it was perfectly acceptable. What was edtech? The answer was that, okay, edtech is you've hired a teacher, he's developed a script, and, he's produced a video, and, it's a market. Basically what you're shooting for is that make learning interesting. Now that is not the case anymore, right? We don't want solutions like that. We want a second generation edtech, which is, shows learning gains. So we are talking about collaborations of specialized resources, technology, media, pedagogy. So it's not just the teacher, but is this team, and that has the skills for active research and change management. And they're able to do pilots for field validation of outcome and impact. So all of this is becoming a more of a sophisticated enterprise that is going to be our target enterprise to work with, right? So this becomes the model of the education service provider. So you have content that is continuously improving. You have a solution around this with resources, lesson plans, or other things which is continuously improving solution. You have the ability to do training and performance monitoring yourself to be able to prove that your solution works. You have community mobilization expertise, so you can get people excited about your product. You have active field research capacity to target needs of specialized, individualized learning pathways. And you have the ability to attract, to join with the government to go after funding. So this is for us our ideal industry partner going forward. These are some of the things, how edtech will change education. This is again musings, but it's up to the ministry to sort of up to the market to determine all of this. But we see that delivery of content, course materials, and counseling will continue to go more towards the digital medium. So more and more content is going to be on the distance learning type of platforms. And they'd be more focused on not just one kind of education, but 1,000 ways of education, right? So socio-emotive learning and life skills will become just as important as the subject curriculum, right? Increasingly, more time will be spent online than in physical classrooms. That, of course, assumes that internet is going to be a stable infrastructure in Pakistan. It is a little bit of a problem now with the economy and all, but it's very important that this also happens from the education point of view, that our structure is kept intact. Online learning is a different kind of learning. The 50 minutes in the classroom works in the classroom, the factory school setting, but most online engagements occur for 10 minutes or less. So we have learned that lesson, and assistive technologies will benefit the marginalized and special needs technology. Uh, that's fine as far as the market is moving, but this is where we want to go, right? So if for those educationists who understands Bloom's taxonomy and who doesn't, it's like the first thing that they teach over there. Pakistan is mostly focused on the lower order thinking skills, right? Remember, understand, apply. We seldom go beyond that, right? So we now want to go towards higher order thinking skills, where they analyze, evaluate, create. Like for instance, I'm going to speak about myself, but I learned quadratic equation, LCM, HCF in maths, and I even became an engineer. But honestly, I've never used those things in my life, right? I've never said I have one brother and a sister, so these are two equations and two unknowns, and let's work out my how I deal with family in the next 3 months. But that's because I only, took them, as lower order thinking skills, memorize them, use them in the test questions, and that's over. But we need to have an education which anything that we learn has to be applicable in life. I think this is the big challenge for the edtech industry. Like for English, the next level communication, storytelling, invoke emotions, these are the outcomes. Maths, next level analysis, beyond addition and multiplication in your everyday life. Physics, chemistry, beyond just memorizing for the tests, right? Leverage the learning of 2 generations of scientific discovery in your everyday life. If you're not doing that, then you're not really living. Computer studies, synthesize code robotics skills as a everyday skill, right? Social studies have to influence behavior, reduce crime, promote merit, ethics, values, good citizenship. Otherwise, it's not working. Life skills, better future, health, nutrition, self-learning, productivity, strategy, planning. These are all skills that you should have when you're in education. So this is what we are giving as a challenge to the edtech industry. And lastly, just to re-emphasize the 7 key pillars of this strategy. The first thing that we will push for is research-led programming. So all the programming that happens in the edtech and the innovation sphere is going to be led by research. Second pillar is private sector manage the service delivery, right? Government is going to stay out of all of this because it's a lot of capacity. We need the best brains, and private sector is able to, get it together. It's very difficult to get that, skill. It's a very specialized skill, and it'll also reverse brain drain. Setting up center of excellence with academia. Academia support is must if we don't want to stagnate and have to redo this thing every 10 years. That we are falling behind. So we need to stay in step with how the world is developing, and that only comes from getting in academia involved. And this is going to be a main focus of the strategy. Move service delivery evaluations and costs from output to outcome and impact. I think I've mentioned that 3 or 4 times in this presentation. That is, I think, the most important challenge for the system. Number 5, develop alternate financing options. We need to get more efficient about this. We need to get creative about this. There is more than $100 billion worth of financing internationally available. Why should it go all to Africa, in India, in Bangladesh? And we need to get our fair share. 6, incentivize provinces through value program and technical assistance. We are doing this to promote equity in the system, right? We don't want Balochistan and KPK to fall behind Punjab and Sindh. We want to do a fair job. We want to provide the same resources. So we want to do this in collaboration with the provinces, add value to them, provide them with the technical resources that only are available at the federal level, understand that after the 18th Amendment, it is their prerogative, their education. We are supporting them. We are not the lead implementation unit. 7, management of system through data analytics. As I said, we are building good infrastructure, state-of-the-art infrastructure for both TV, broadcasting, and for internet, LMS, CMS, etc. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Qazilbash Saab. Thank you very much. I must apologize. Sorry for joining late. Thanks, Shahid, for carrying the load. I think there you go, ladies and gentlemen. You've heard that Pakistan is moving into the 20th century, but close to the 21st century. We are finally beginning to understand the technologies required in education. I hope, Qazilbash Saab, you succeed, because the rest of the government is still technology agnostic, I should say. They don't even know the technology exists. But I would be very happy to see this policy succeed. It's a very far-reaching policy, lots of interesting things in it. And as you've seen, ladies and gentlemen, that this policy requires a huge amount of technology. Technology ko hame fully adopt karna. Iske liye we've also got 2 technology firms jo ab hame batayenge, are they ready, how they're going to do it. So our paas hain ji Haroon Yasin saab from Taleemabad and Mehboob Saab from Knowledge Platform. I'm told Taleemabad is doing teacher training, Mahmood is doing student level training. So Mehboob Saab, how would you react to this, and how ready are you to take on the challenge? Or kya aap isko jis tarah apna Qazilbash Saab सोच रहे हैं कि you will be able to take it to the next level. Current 2nd or 3rd generation edtech, are you guys ready? And how do you feel this can be scaled up? Because देखिए ना, हमारा जो demographic problem है, we want it like yesterday. Doing it in 10 years' time is almost useless to us. नायाब यहाँ पता नहीं है कि नहीं है, she can tell you कि जी, the way the demographic dividend is going now, we may be in the demographic, not the youth dividend, but the old age problem. So we have to move fast. So Mehboob Saab, over to you. How do you feel you'll be able to deal with this, and how quickly can you do it?
Thank you, Najeem Saab. First of all, we have a very strong relationship with the government, and I agree with what Zulfiqar Saab said on where we need to get to. I do have some differences of opinion on how we should get them. And what I'd like to do is just, I'm going to speak for very 5 minutes, not more than that, but I'd like to share a few slides more to set up the context of where we are right now, right? And this is our data. We try to use best faith, whatever we can get, and extrapolate the data. So the first question is, what is the education system? So from college, K to college, we have about 86 million kids, right? And it's growing 4-5 million a year. 22 million are out of school. The latest government figures are published only till 2018. But if you extrapolate up to 2023, now the private sector is already bigger than the government sector. And this difference will keep going. Third point is that the level of spending is extremely low. We spend about $170 per year on a child. This is public sector and private sector combined.
Just to the point, are you showing some slides or not? Because you're showing us there are no slides. You're just showing us your files.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'll try again. Can you see now?
Yes.
Yeah, that's better. Yeah, good.
Okay. So first point is private sector, whole population of education needs are growing hugely. Private sector is already bigger than the government sector. So when the government sector says, what are we doing? Is it a question of regulating the entire, supporting the entire sector, or supporting basically the government-owned schools, which is a shrinking part of the whole thing. Second of all, we are at a very abysmally low level of funding of $170 per person. And if you take out the college level spending, which is much higher, you're left at $140, which is about $10, $12 a year per kid. Very low. Now, the next thing is, how prepared are we? So by our estimate, only about 2.34 million kids have devices. Now, I think to recognize in education is that education is not like calling a Kareem where you use a phone for 5 minutes. You need a kid to have a device, whether on a shared basis in school or individually, for 2 hours, 4 hours, 6 hours a day. And we only have about 2.3 million devices in the country that kids have access to, out of which 1.2 million or 1.3 million are held by the 1.4 million kids going to college or university. So when you look at K-12 sector, only a very, very small percentage of people have devices. This creates a huge constraint in how we grow, right? So the infrastructure is not there. If you look at, we started working in China. When we started work there, the technology, the infrastructure is already there. Kids had devices in the school, at home, bandwidth was there. In Pakistan, technology, content and software and learning methods is going faster than the infrastructural constraints. So this is something we really need to solve. The other thing, Zulfiqar mentioned this, like this is our current instructional support paradigm for Pakistan, professional development using education technology for 9 things: professional development, lesson learning, and content creation. This is at the teacher level, the new concept learning, reinforcement and remedial learning, entrance and periodic tests, exam preps, learning games, and project-based learning. So this is at the student level. So the complexity of this is growing very, 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 very quickly. And you all know ChatGPT, nobody had heard of it 6 months ago. And now everyone recognizes that ChatGPT will revolutionize education. And this will keep accelerating. So my question is, agreed with everything Zulfiqar Saab saying, but how do we crack this? Some key issues are private-public partnerships are absolutely necessary. I believe government should focus much more on solving the infrastructure challenge. Today, government is taking on too many challenges. Secondly, we need to increase the funding pie. There is funding available. We need to increase that pie, and government should think about how we can work together to massively increase that pie. Thirdly, until we change the curriculum, and again, this is in government hands, single national curriculum was a disastrous, terrible, terrible, terrible idea. Everyone in the world is moving away from single ideas of curriculum, and we are embracing it further. So we need to jettison that horrid idea of a single curriculum. Government should get out of the business of getting schools. They've done a lousy job at doing it. This is why the private sector has grown. Get out of pedagogy and content. Don't be so prescriptive of what we're doing. And finally, let's get kids to complete globally. That's how you improve. Let's take the federal district and put it into TIMS, put it into PISA. So that's all I have to say for now. So I think I can agree, but we have to approach this differently with much less government involvement, and government should focus on some key things which are not there and we need them for.
Thank you very much, Mehboob. Thank you. I think that's a very wise idea. Quite frankly, this is a huge agenda. I hope Zulfiqar succeeds. It's a huge agenda because really we need to move our education system in the 21st century. I sit at the other end of the spectrum where I'll try and employ graduates, and I can tell you the abysmal quality that is coming out. And when I talk to universities, they tell me, what can they do? Schooling is terrible. We can't polish a product that comes to us in such a bad form. So it's a huge issue, and I'm glad you raised some issues. Let's move on to Haroon, Yasin. Haroon Saab, what's your view on the situation?
Assalamualaikum. Zulfiqar sir, thank you for the presentation. I think there's quite a lot of points within the presentation that make a lot of sense. Taleemabad 2015 से पाकिस्तान में काम कर रहा है, and long before COVID had hit, जिस जमाने में पाकिस्तान was going nuts over Etrogul और वो जो टर्किश ड्रामा PTV पे ब्रॉडकास्ट होता था, उसी वक्त एट्रोगल से ये उससे एक घंटा पहले प्राइम टाइम चिल्ड्रन का स्लॉट होता था। आपको याद होगा, हमने बचपन में सुबह 7 बजे शाम 5 बजे पूरे पाकिस्तान में केबल टेलीविजन नहीं आया था, हम कार्टून देखा ही उस पे करते थे। या उस पे एनक वाला जिन, उमरू यार, इस तरह के लेजेंडरी 90s का पीटीवी का एक दौर था जिसमें बहुत सा अच्छा कंटेंट आता था। बट देन लुक एट 2000 to 2020 and that kind of stuff just disappeared. आना ही बंद हो गया टीवी पे। And so back in 2018 we met Firdaus Ashiqawan and Imran Khan and said, look, the primetime children television is dead and needs to be resurrected, and here's one option by which you can do so. तालीमाबाद का लर्निंग कंटेंट बच्चों के लिए बना हुआ था K to 5. इट हैड बीन टेस्टेड। हम लोगों ने राजनपुर में, विहाड़ी में, थट्टा में, मुजफ्फरगढ़ में बच्चों को वो कंटेंट दिखा के उनको स्कूल जाए बगैर उनको पूरा एक ग्रेड पास कराया था। सो वी न्यू इट वर्कड, और उसको हम लोगों ने 2018 में प्राइम टाइम टेलीविजन पे ब्रॉडकास्ट करना शुरू कर दिया। नाउ ब्रॉडकास्टिंग, हम एक नजरिए से गए थे ब्रॉडकास्टिंग में, और उसका एक्चुअल नतीजा मैं आपको बता भी देता हूँ कि क्या था। 2018 में तालीमाबाद ने पीटीवी पे अपने मटेरियल को लगाया। 2019 और 2020 में कोविड आ गया और फिर टेली स्कूल जो है वो लॉन्च हो गया। टेली स्कूल की भी जब अंडरस्टैंडिंग और उसकी पूरी रिसर्च की गई तो पाकिस्तान की 70 मिलियन जो स्कूल पॉपुलेशन है उसके अंदर से 6.5 मिलियन यानी कि 8% बच्चे रफली जो हैं वो वीक ऑन वीक टेलीविजन ब्रॉडकास्ट के ऊपर अपने आप को इनलिस्ट कर रहे थे। So there's a huge problem in terms of, I mean, ये हमारा reach थी at the time when we were showing this material। ये पूरे पाकिस्तान से these red dots represent किन किन इलाकों से यूजर जो हैं वो आ रहे थे। So you can see all across the country deep usage from areas that you don't even expect it to come from। But the main problem remained कि 6.5 मिलियन पे जाके गैलप का भी सर्वे था, वो प्लेटो हो गई थी उसकी रीच। एंड दैट ब्रिंग्स अस टू द सेकंड क्वेश्चन कि कंटेंट लगा देना एक चीज है, लेकिन जिस तरह जुल्फिकार ने कहा कंटेंट के इर्द गिर्द एक पूरा इकोसिस्टम बिल्ड करना जिससे बच्चा सिर्फ पैसिवली टीवी पे बैठ के देख नहीं रहा, उसकी माँ भी पूछ रही है, उसका बाप भी पूछ रहा है, उसका स्कूल भी उसको उस लर्निंग कंटेंट के अराउंड उसका फोल्डिंग सेटअप कर रहा है। दैट इज द मेन चैलेंज दैट हैज टू बी सेट अप। सो ये नंबर 1 है कि ब्रॉडकास्टिंग और रेडियो पे लगा देने से मसला हल नहीं होगा, उसके इर्द गिर्द इकोसिस्टम बिल्ड करना है। और जिस तरह महबूब ने कहा कि पाकिस्तान में पब्लिक स्कूल से ज्यादा बच्चे प्राइवेट स्कूल्स में जाते हैं। आपने देखा होगा गली मोहल्ले में सना स्कूल, समीना स्कूल, सनशाइन स्कूल खुल गया है। 500 से 1000 रुपए इनकी फीस होती है और ज्यादातर आबादी उसमें जा रही है, बट उसमें लर्निंग की क्वालिटी जो है वो आम स्कूल से, पब्लिक स्कूल से भी नीचे की है, बिकॉज उसकी टीचर एफए पास होती है, उसको 3000 रुपए तनख्वाह मिल रही होती है, नॉट मच इन द वे ऑफ टीचिंग क्वालिटी ओवर देयर। एंड व्हाट वी बिगैन टू डू फॉर दोज स्कूल्स वाज वी बिगैन टू ब्रिंग देम अंडर वन अम्ब्रेला। हमने उन सब स्कूलों को जाके कहा आप एक एक अम्ब्रेला के नीचे आ जाएंगे, इस अम्ब्रेला के अंदर आपकी सारी की सारी टीचर्स जो हैं वो डिजिटली ट्रेन की जाएंगी। पाकिस्तान का पहला टीचर ट्रेनिंग प्लेटफॉर्म था, इस पे तकरीबन 9000 टीचर्स आके अपनी ट्रेनिंग और सर्टिफिकेशन हासिल कर चुकी हैं। जवान लड़कियां जो कि अनएम्प्लॉयड थी वो इस पे आके सर्टिफिकेशन लेती हैं और स्कूलों में जाके नौकरियां करना शुरू कर देती हैं। एंड दिस प्लेटफॉर्म हैड अ ह्यूज रिपल इफेक्ट, राइट। स्कूलों में टीचर्स जो है उनकी क्वालिटी ऑफ लर्निंग इंप्रूव होना शुरू हो गई, और फिर हमने स्क्रिप्टेड लर्निंग को इंट्रोड्यूस कराया जैसा जुल्फिकार बात कर रहे थे, जिससे फ्लोर ऑफ द क्वालिटी वो फर्दर इंप्रूव हो गई। आई थिंक वन ऑफ द मेन थिंग्स दैट वी हैव रियलाइज्ड इज कि हमने काम इस्लामाबाद से शुरू किया था, उसके बाद राजनपुर, विहाड़ी, थट्टा, मुजफ्फरगढ़, इंटीरियर सिंध, इन सब जगहों पे काम किया। इस्लामाबाद इज अ ह्यूज बबल, पूरा ऐसा लगता है आप किसी और मुल्क में। एंड इफ वी डिजाइन एजुकेशन सॉल्यूशंस by keeping Islamabad in mind, they're never gonna go outside the confines of this particular boundary. The world looks very very different. मैं आपको मिसाल देता हूँ, आउट ऑफ स्कूल चिल्ड्रन के साथ काम कर रहे थे। आउट ऑफ स्कूल चिल्ड्रन हमने अज्यूम किया था कि उनको पढ़ाने वाला नहीं है इसलिए बच्चे पढ़ नहीं रहे थे, बट टर्न्स आउट वो बच्चा सुबह ईंटों के भट्टे पे काम करता है, शाम को कारी करने जाता है, और अल्टरनेटिव लर्निंग सेंटर जहां हम उसको पढ़ाने की कोशिश कर रहे थे वहां पे रात के किसी टाइम पे आता है, भूखा थका हुआ, और उधर वो 2 महीने पढ़ता है, और उसके बाद क्योंकि वो सीजनल वर्कर होते हैं और कॉटन की पिकिंग और गंदम की पिकिंग करने किसी और इलाके में चले जाते हैं, वो शिफ्ट हो जाता है। एंड हियर वी वर, हम मासूमों की तरह उधर गए थे, कह रहे थे इनको अगर कंटेंट दे दिया जाए ना तो बच्चा सीखेगा. नॉट ट्रू. आपने उस बच्चे के लिए काफी कॉम्प्लेक्स आर्किटेक्चर सेटअप करना है. एंड भी फिर उन बच्चों को ट्रेल किया हमने, जहां जहां जाते थे हम भी पीछे पीछे उनके साथ जाते थे, एंड मैनेज टू गेट देम टू enroll and pass exams. But one of our biggest learnings has been, हम इस्लामाबाद तो कहते हैं ग्रेवयार्ड ऑफ पायलट्स. यहाँ पे वर्ल्ड बैंक सपोर्टेड, यूनिसेफ सपोर्टेड बहुत सा काम होता है, पर इसको इस बाउंड्री से बाहर लेके जाना अब हमारा सबसे बड़ा चैलेंज होगा. And that is, as we've realized, something that is very very complex to pull off. But again, जुल्फिकार के साथ हम काम इसलिए कर रहे हैं because that challenge needs to be sorted.
Thank you, Haroon. Very, very kind of you. Dekhiye, I think you made some very valid points. Ki it has to be an ecosystem, and Islam is the graveyard of pilots. I think that's excellent analysis. Very good. But mujhe bataiye, Zulfiqar sahab, turning to you first. It's a huge responsibility. As I said, the demographic dividend is passing us by. The median age is increasing every year. Are we ever going to educate this population, or are we going to continue to talk about this? Aapne jo plan kiya bada acha hai. It has potential, I agree. Do you see it scaling up, or do you see that the education ministry will sit over it? It'll do 10 years in Islamabad, then it'll go somewhere else. How do you expect to scale it up? And what is the terminal date? Aap kya soch rahe hain? Kab tak ye khatam hoga? Kab tak pura Pakistan digitized ho jayega? Aur mashallah, bacche robotic lab se khel rahe honge, maker lab se khel rahe honge, वगैरह. When do you think this will happen?
जी मैं आपको जो जवाब दूंगा, I will answer this in two ways. First is all of us make decisions based on or view the world in terms of filters from their past experience. So in my past, I've worked in the Silicon Valley and I've learned one truism: any change that happens in 5 years or it doesn't happen at all. So I'm not one of those people who believes in patient capital to a large extent. I'm not one of those people that says that this education problem is take us 50 years to solve. When there is a will, when there is a drive and there is momentum, then all things fall in place, and either it happens in 5 years or it doesn't happen in 5 years. आपको याद होगा कि the fall of Baghdad 5 years before it was conquered by Halaku Khan was one of the most thriving cities of learning in the world. 5 years later, it was totally destroyed. Same thing with Balkh, Sandara in this thing. So, मैं तो कहूँगा कि number one principle of this thing is that if this happens, it's going to happen relatively quickly. We have examples of Singapore, we have examples of Bangladesh, we have examples of many economies, Malaysia, that Thailand, that completely transformed themselves in less than 5 years. If you look at the key portion, even China ka jo key portion hai, that is I think 10 years. So number one, change, if it happens in a short amount of time or it doesn't happen at all. Second thing is, अगर आप education की specifically देखें journeys जिन nations ने अपनी education improve की है, whether you look at the American example in the 1910s and 20s, there was a lot of concern कि भाई education बड़ी खराब है, नहीं जा रही. जब England ने प्रशियंस के मुकाबले में अपनी एजुकेशन डाली थी, लॉर्ड क्या कहते हैं मैकॉली ने किया था. सो एंड उसके बाद अगर आप इस तरह देखें, इंग्लैंड ने जो अपनी रिफॉर्म की थी फ्रॉम द ओल्ड जीसी लेवल्स टू द न्यू सिस्टम, अगेन दिस वाज प्राइवेट लेड इनिशिएटिव्स. ठीक है ना, इन द सेंस के बेसिकली द कंट्री गॉट टुगेदर एंड बेसिकली सेड यार वी हैव टू फिक्स दिस प्रॉब्लम, राइट. इस तरह की चीजों में, because there are as Haroon said, there are a lot of components. आपने फंडिंग इंक्रीज करनी है, आपने मतलब कोलैबोरेशंस करनी है, अपनी बेस्ट ब्रेन्स को आपने यहाँ पर एंगेज करना है. जब तक अपनी बेस्ट ब्रेन्स को यहाँ पर एंगेज नहीं करेंगे, कुछ प्रॉब्लम सॉल्व नहीं होंगे. जब बेस्ट ब्रेन्स को एंगेज करेंगे तो 20 or 30 गुड ब्रेन्स आर इनफ. they can do क्या कहते हैं absolute wonders. So the second thing is that we have to, I think the ministry can provide a vision, can provide a roadmap. We can do, show that it's not just talk. We are putting together programs and interventions that are, going ahead with this thing. But whether it scales to all of the 200 million population, uske liye hame political will, uske liye hame public backing, public activism, और ये जो हम 6 चैनल्स लगा रहे हैं टीवी के, ये इस और सोशल मीडिया के बड़ा प्रेजेंस लगा रहे हैं, ये इस होप में है कि भाई दे विल इग्नाइट अ पब्लिक डिबेट कि यार अदर देन पॉलिटिक्स एंड न्यूज़ देयर इज अनदर एजेंडा वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट फॉर दिस कंट्री, जिसमें खाली एजुकेशन नहीं है, हेल्थ केयर भी है, डेवलपमेंट, ह्यूमन कैपिटल डेवलपमेंट भी है, और चीज़ें भी हैं। लेकिन एजुकेशन को जब तक हमारा ऐसा एजेंडा नहीं होगा कि हमारे हर न्यूज़पेपर में हर रोज इसके बारे में हेडलाइंस हो, क्रिटिसिज्म हो, एंगेजमेंट हो, एक्टिविज्म हो, तो कुछ भी नहीं होगा। लेकिन अगर ये सब कुछ होगा तो आई थिंक the change will come very, very rapidly. This is my own personal opinion, and I sense this strategy as we present this strategy as a catalyst, but the ignition of the fire has to be much wider.
Mehboob, ये जो this dichotomy between public and private schools, जो private schools quality देते हैं, public schools कुछ नहीं देते, and quite frankly there's a big premium in the labor market on private schools, and the poor guy who goes to the public school kind of suffers. And I've heard many people tell me कि मैं तो अपने बच्चे भेजना ही चाहता, because quite frankly outcome मुझे returns में कोई नहीं नजर आता. So do you think edtech can take care of that? And is edtech a levelizer or is it not? Or will edtech be, again, I should probably go back to Qazilbash sahab on this too, कि जो emphasis है कि private स्कूलों पे ज़्यादा होगा. तो I was just reading a very interesting book by a lady called Diane Ravitch, who used to be the Assistant Secretary of State. She felt that the excessive emphasis in the private sector has kind of marginalized the public school in the American system. How do you see that, especially with edtech? Will it levelize or will it exaggerate the difference?
Well, I think, look, first of all, our funding on education, both private and public, is very low. And you need about, let's say, $100 per child. So let's be clear, edtech is not going to decrease the amount of money you need in education. It's going to increase the requirement by at least $100 million, $100 per child.
Per child per year or per month? Per
child per year. So that then translates into $9 billion more. So I'm just talking about this. You see, ultimately, I feel this issue is one of money. We are making a lot of progress now, what the work that ministry is doing, Haroon is doing, our company is doing, others are doing, in coming up with better content, scripted learning, other forms of learning, games-based learning, and so on. So that sector is advancing, right? But if you can't get more money in the system, obviously it will skew towards the people who have the devices, who have the infrastructure, and so on. So in this respect, the public sector system, because it's more capital constrained, right? And people who are in the public sector don't have, the ability public sector to raise $9 billion. You tell me, you're an economist, can the public sector raise $9 billion? I would submit that already what's happening is that in the private sector is now bigger than the public sector. That means they're raising capital from individuals who were previously not paying for education, right? So ultimately, we need to come up with a solution where we get at least $9 billion more tomorrow into education to really for edtech to have impact at scale. The issue is not the content, it's not the pedagogy. All these things will keep improving anyway. After all, the world is driving this change, right? The issue for Pakistan is how do we get $9 billion at least more into the education system? Right?
But hang on. When you say $9 billion, do you mean $9 billion over a time period or $9 billion annually?
$9 billion every single year. You see what I mean? So we have some fundamental issues we are not looking at. That how are we going to get these devices into this country? How are we going to fund devices? How are we going to fund bandwidth? How are we going to provide electricity? You know what I mean? So we can come up with great solutions, but at the end of the day, those solutions will benefit the people who have the infrastructure capacity to be able to avail of those solutions. And I feel that that more focus should be given by the government on the infrastructural aspects, on the funding aspects, and leave more to the private sector on what the particular solutions are.
Now, Haroon sir, when you worked in Rajanpur and those outlying districts, did you have more success than Islamabad? And secondly, please tell me, I think you raised a very valid concern that we have to get the education ecosystem going, and I like that idea. But how do you do that? I don't think that parents are interested. And the other thing that I want to raise with all three of you, like the funding issue. Dusra, what role does a teacher play in this new system? And is the teacher motivated enough to do this? If I was a teacher, I would say, the hell with you. Why should I teach your children for 18,000 or 5,000 bucks a month? I have no career prospects. I have nothing. I'm going to remain a teacher forever. I'm going to get this measly salary forever. I know a few teachers. I talk to them. This teacher, poor woman, is sitting there correcting books late at night, but she gets a pittance. How do you deal with that question?
I think पहला सवाल तो आपका, I think regarding, let's shatter a few myths that we've discovered working in all of these districts. Number one, कि parents तालीम चाहते नहीं है या तालीम के बारे में आगाह नहीं है. भट्टों पे काम करने वाले से गंदम की काश्तकारी करने वाले मज़ारों तक. I have yet to come across a parent जो मुझे ये बताता है कि वो तालीम की इंपॉर्टेंस में नहीं बिलीव करता. इनफैक्ट एक तो एक बंदे से मिला था, वो बूढ़े हो चुके थे, 2 बेटे थे उनके, एक को स्कूल भिजवाया था, एक को काश्तकारी के लिए घर रखा था. और वो कहते हैं जो स्कूल चला गया यार, वो ही एंडेड अप कमजोर सा हो गया, उसने कभी फील्ड में काम नहीं किया था, मैट्रिक कर लिया, और उसके बाद वो जॉब्स करने के लिए, अफसर बनने के लिए शहरों में गया और किसी ने उसको नौकरी नहीं दी. अब वो वापस खेतों में आ गया और ना इधर का ना उधर का, ट्रैक्टर भी नहीं उसको चलाना आता. These people measure the ROI on an investment that they are making, and if it delivers those dividends, they are more than happy to comply. दूसरी चीज कि सरकारी स्कूल में टीचर्स जो हैं लेजी हैं और इनेप्ट हैं, होते थे एक जमाने में, बट पिछले 10-15 सालों में बहुत से जवान लोगों की भर्ती हुई है. हमने जब भी पब्लिक स्कूलों में गए और जवान टीचर्स पाए, we found them to be very, very interested in adopting their methods and making their work more efficient and in using products and technology. तो ये भी मेरी एक बहुत बड़ी myth थी कि सरकारी टीचर सिर्फ डंडे से चलता है और किसी चीज से नहीं चलता. That also turned out not to be true. I do agree though with your point on private school teachers. आपने 15,000 ज्यादा बताइए. On average ज़ैनब कुरैशी की और बाकी लोगों की रिपोर्ट थी, तकरीबन 3 से 5,000 रुपए उनको मिल रहे होते हैं. ट्रांसपोर्ट उन्होंने खुद करनी होती है. इसके अंदर 3 से 5,000 रुपए के अंदर एक टीचर 8 घंटे खड़े होकर क्लासरूम में बोलती है और बच्चों को पढ़ाती है. दैट इज अ ट्रेवेस्टी. इनफैक्ट रिपोर्ट केम आउट ऑथर्ड बाय आई बिलीव डॉक्टर ताहिर इंद्राबी. उन्होंने लिखा हुआ था कि पाकिस्तान का लो फी प्राइवेट स्कूल सेक्टर जो है वो इट इज बिल्ट ऑन द एक्सप्लॉयटेशन ऑफ यंग women in Pakistan. I think ये इसके लिए तालीमाबाद का जो प्लेटफॉर्म है वो बहुत सी ऐसी टीचर इस्तेमाल करती हैं, उनमें उसको सर्टिफिकेशन मिलती है. जैसे ही टीचर को सर्टिफिकेशन मिल जाती है ना, वो फौरन जाके ना एक अच्छे स्कूल में 25,000 रुपए तनख्वाह के लिए सबमिट करती है और अपनी नौकरी ट्रांसफर करके वहां पे कर लेती है. सो जो तालीमात का प्रोग्राम है उनको मोबिलिटी देता है, उनके पास सर्टिफिकेट आ जाते हैं. फिनलैंड की हुकूमत से ठप्पा लगा हुआ सर्टिफिकेट उनके पास होता है, वो ड्राइंग रूम में फ्रेम करा के उसको पीछे लगाते हैं, बट ऑल्सो अल्टीमेटली अपने करियर के लिए किसी और स्कूल में शिफ्ट कर जाते हैं. दैट begs a question, ये बॉटम ऑफ द पिरामिड पे प्राइवेट स्कूलिंग जो है, इधर अगर आप 3,000 तनख्वाह देते रहेंगे तो ऑफ कोर्स नोबडी इज गोना bust their gut trying to educate kids in a good way, and that needs to change. ये PEF और SEF प्रोग्राम्स में भी इसको चेंज नहीं किया. PEF वाले प्रोग्राम्स फॉर एग्जांपल लो फी प्राइवेट स्कूल मालिकान को पैसे देते हैं कि वो आउट ऑफ स्कूल चिल्ड्रन को एनरोल करें. 400 रुपया देते हैं, वो 400 से 500 रुपया देते हैं फी बच्चा फी मंथ. किस टीचर को क्या सैलरी मिलेगी इसके अंदर? एंड सो कमिंग बैक राइट ऑल द वे टू महबूब्स प्रॉब्लम, राइट, जितने आप पैसे डाल रहे हैं उसमें क्या ही हो सकता है. एंड सो दिस आल्सो ड्रास्टिकली गवर्नमेंट की प्रायोरिटीज में शिफ्ट होने की जरूरत है, क्योंकि टेक्नोलॉजी और प्रोडक्ट्स एक हद तक ले जाएंगे, लेकिन हमारे भी टीचर्स ग्रेजुएट होके ना फॉरेन स्ट्रीम से निकल के अच्छे स्कूल में चले जाते हैं. जो गरीब लड़की है जो पढ़ लिख जाती है, तालीमात के प्लेटफॉर्म सर्टिफिकेट हासिल कर लेती है, वो अमीर स्कूल में जाकर पढ़ाना शुरू हो जाती है. अल्टीमेटली ये बॉटम ऑफ द पिरामिड जो है वो रह जाता है. सो इस पूरी स्ट्रैटेजी की लिंचपिन जो है वो टीचर है, लेकिन पाकिस्तान में टीचर वो बनता है, अफसोस है कि वो जो और किसी शोबे में नहीं जा सकता, वो टीचर बन रहा होता है. हमने रिसेंटली अपने टीचर्स को बहुत ज्यादा सराहना शुरू किया, उनको पब्लिकली एक्नॉलेज करना शुरू किया. जो टीचर हमारे प्लेटफॉर्म के लीडर बोर्ड पे टॉप पे आती है उसको हम फूलों का बुके देके आते हैं. एंड दैट काइंड ऑफ सिंपल स्टफ, राइट, लेटिंग टीचर्स नो दैट दे आर we previously submitted a question to the prime minister once when he met him, and the question was कि in terms of sheer size हमारी टीचिंग फोर्स जो मुल्क की है ना, वो हमारी आर्म्ड फोर्स से ज्यादा बड़ी है. फौजियों से ज्यादा अब आपके टीचर्स हैं. अच्छा, एक एंड पे आप रेगुलरली ट्रेन्ड वेल ऑयल्ड मशीन है जिसको आप कॉन्टिन्यूसली अपग्रेड करते रहते हैं, राइट? नई वेपनरी, नई ट्रेनिंग, व्हाट नॉट, बैटल रेडीनेस, राइट? और इसकी ये आपके हाल को प्रोटेक्ट कर रही है, ये आपके मुस्तकबिल को प्रोटेक्ट कर रही है, और इसकी ट्रेनिंग, इसकी इन्वेस्टमेंट, इसकी अपस्किलिंग क्लोज टू जीरो है. दैट नीड्स टू चेंज. ये लिंचपिन ये है. काबिल लोग हैं, इंटरेस्टेड लोग हैं. मुल्क में 30% लड़कियां ग्रेजुएट होती हैं और नौकरियां नहीं कर सकती, वो सारी टीचिंग फोर्स में आ सकती हैं और फख्र के साथ आ सकती हैं, बट फख्र के लिए उनको पैसे देने हैं और उनको रिकग्निशन देनी है. दैट नीड्स टू चेंज फ्रॉम अ पॉलिसी पर्सपेक्टिव.
जी, जुल्फिकार साहब, tell
जी
me, is the
अच्छा
government willing to fund education? Because abhi to government spends more on roads than on education. Is the government serious about education or not? And secondly, the point that Haroon Sahab made, which is very important. I did my PhD with Gary Becker, the person who founded the subject on returns to education. And his whole thesis was, for which he got the Nobel Prize, KD, education is an investment good, and people study to make a living. They don't study for consumption purposes. तो इसको अब कैसे इंश्राइन करेंगे अपनी पॉलिसी में, फंडिंग को और रिटर्न्स टू एजुकेशन को? जी,
इसके अभी जो हमारा प्लान है इसके सो फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल I agree with my learned colleague Mehboob ke financing is perhaps the biggest problem in this equation. ठीक है ना? It is something which is magnified with the fact अगर आपने उसको वाकई understand करना है तो आपने ये understand करना है कि अगर US public education system है, they spend between $6,000 and $9,000 a year educating a single child. Pakistan, as Mehboob said, spends about $150 to $200 a child. So the difference between $150 or $200 can never be, you can never provide that same quality of education as you can with $6,000 or $9,000, right? And this is a big problem because what does that do for our future generation? How are we going to be competitive globally if other countries can do this to their children and we cannot, right? So this is not just a government problem, but this is a national problem. Okay, here we are. We need to improve our economy. We need to sort of do all of those things to become a viable country. Otherwise, bad things can happen. So वो एक separate discussion है. लेकिन what it leads us to believe that if we have to create a solution, then we look at the telecom industry. Telecom industry में जो average revenue है, जो industry को sustain कर रहा है, वो है between $30 to $50 to $60. अगर आप यूरोप की बात करें, अगर अमेरिका की बात करें per student. यहाँ पर पाकिस्तान, बांग्लादेश, इंडिया की जो इकोनॉमीज हैं, यहाँ पर जो उनको सस्टेन कर रहा है about $2, $3. अब तो खैर पाकिस्तान में तो I think it's gone to 80 cents because of this rupee devaluation, और वो बहुत शोर कर रहे हैं. But I think the right amount is somewhere between $1.50 to $2. They can sustain themselves because they operate differently here than they operate in the Western economies. So हमारी भी focus, हमारा जो है ना domestic edtech industry के साथ वो यही है कि we have to make cost a part of this equation, and deployment cost has to be minimized to the extent possible. We simply cannot for the next 15-20 years sustain or afford the क्या कहते हैं Western or the developed world kind of edtech prices. So we need a thriving edtech industry that focuses on cost. Having said that, you are still talking about, obviously, $9 billion a year ka number will scare away a lot of people, but it's not that, right? I mean, it is that eventually if you want to get it absolutely right, but we can make a big difference, with even a few $100 million or couple of $1 billion a year. Definitely उस किस्म की additions होनी पड़ेंगी, or they need to come. Donor financing is very helpful. It is much so in education, and we need to thank all those people for providing us the opportunity to do that. But at some point, we have to take the reins into our own hands. And essentially, जो कि हम individual level पे करते हैं कि हमारी middle class जो है अपने expenses को sacrifice करती है. Nadeemul Haq has one less sandwich and to be able to afford his children education. So if we are willing to sacrifice ourselves, I think it is nationalism and citizenship and all of those things कि we have to essentially जो $2 billion of public philanthropy अभी जाती है और हमारे नौकरों को जाती है, हमारे इस तरह के पर्सनल कॉजेज में जाती है, उनको हम नेशनल डेवलपमेंट की तरफ फंड करें. सो एक सोर्स तो ये है कि पब्लिक फिलैंथ्रोपी को इस तरफ चैनल किया जाए. उसमें बहुत ज्यादा ज़कात के इस तरह के एलिमेंट्स हैं, सदके के एलिमेंट्स हैं, स्टफ लाइक दैट हैं, जिसको कि हमने चैनलाइज नहीं किया. और अगर हमारी एडटेक इंडस्ट्री लर्निंग आउटकम और लर्निंग गोल्स की तरफ जाएगी, तो दैट इज आई थिंक अ वेरी गुड way to attract CSR funding, corporate CSR funding, foundation funding, because कोई और fact के ऊपर focus करेगी. So I think that is the one thing which is going to help that channel a lot of that domestic जो हमारे पास opportunities है. Secondly, we need to get the financial market involved. So Karachi में जो financial houses हैं, they need to come to us. We need to create social impact bonds की type of opportunities. We need to create risk investors, so that social investors एक different classes of risks में अपनी savings कर सकें. And we need to get out of putting our money in land, in real estate, right? All Pakistanis, मैं कहूँगा, मैं आप लोग भी जो से यहाँ पर सुन रहे हैं, और मैं भी ऐसे करता हूँ कि हमारा पैसा जो है banks में नहीं होता, हमारा पैसा plots में होता है. That is actually you are cheating your future generation by doing that, because that money should be active in the economy. And by that, you will create jobs and you will create opportunities. And also some of those taxation money will then go into, sort of building education. So we need to get the money of Pakistan out from real estate and deploy it in industry or deploy it in these social causes and investments. That is going to make a big difference. But having said that, we are still not going to reach $9 billion, as Mehboob said. So uske liye we have to tap international funding. देखें जी, SDG goals के लिए, climate change के लिए, climate change support के लिए, there are carbon के लिए, there are a lot of opportunities for Pakistan to be aggressive. Brilliant people from McKinsey and from other profiles who can do this need to engage with us. Some of them will do it for the patriotic reasons. Some of them will do it for as consultants. I myself worked with the industry for federal government for 1.5 साल. So I think at some point हम सबको थोड़ा time देना पड़ेगा, क्या कहते हैं, government के साथ और ये और वो. And I think we need to create some financial magic and pass on this risk in a credible way. आपको पता है कि education has one of the best returns ever. So अगर आप future में इसको, you can absolutely create risk bearing instruments that can be paid off after 10 years, 15 years. There is opportunity to do that. We have to get it into creative financing like that. So that's how we will do this.
So I just want to pick up on two things that Zulfiqar said: financial magic and unlocking capital. You can reach $9 billion, and it's not that difficult. But you need a government that's focused on this problem. After all, the private sector today, out of the $12 billion that is being spent on education, $7 billion is generated by the private sector. So the private sector is already not only half the number of students, it's already almost double the amount of spending of the government sector. So there is plenty of capital within Pakistan. This CSR, venture, philanthropy, foreign capital, this can only act as catalyst capital. In other words, ultimately, you need to get families to pay for that extra money to educate their kids well. And the government has to do a very simple job: pass laws to make like the 10-year financing available. This is ultimately, education is a financial problem because it is established. I mean, I went to the top schools in America. I only paid $10,000 from my parents. The rest I got student loans, some scholarships, paid off the student loans, not a problem. Education is self-funding. And at the lower level of education that you have, the more self-funding it is. In other words, if you actually, you look at it, if you fund a student at the university level, your chance of getting a payback on that is less than if you fund a student at basic education level. So education is self-funding. We need to be dramatically creative about it. Use blockchain, use new laws, use the creative financial engineering that Zulfiqar is talking about, and you can reach the $9 billion. We've reached $7 billion already. There's no problem in the private sector in Pakistan funding $9 billion. And if you think you're going to get it from the World Bank, you're just wrong. You're just not going to be able to get the money from outside. The only way you can get the money is from the people of Pakistan themselves.
Ji, Haroon sir.
I mean, I do agree with this. Ke financing gap jo hai, I don't think it's going to come from outside. I think of late we have realized the folly of hoping for someone from outside to come and rescue and put money into Pakistan. But I think most people, including external lenders and external donors, have realized that that is not going to help Pakistan. And I think that this is the right time to, I think, reset those priorities. I think internal budgets में भी इतनी ज़्यादा cleaning up हो सकती है and education की तरफ reallocation हो सकती है, that the game can start from there. I agree with Zulfiqar कि overnight तो 9 billion नहीं materialize होंगे, but just to put it into perspective कि हम लोग और कितनी चीज़ों पे state पैसा लगा रहे होते हैं और तालीम पे नहीं लगा रहे होते, that for sure is the biggest sign that this is yet to become a priority. हुकूमत ने जब से तालीम डिवॉल्व होकर प्रोविंशियल सब्जेक्ट बन गई थी, अब प्रोविंशियल गवर्नमेंट्स जो है तालीम के बजट सेट करती हैं, वो बजट्स बड़े थे, लेकिन बजट्स बढ़ने के बाद इंटरेस्टिंगली इनफ नादिया नवी वाला रोट एन आर्टिकल ऑन इट कि ज्यादातर जो बजट दिया जाता था, हर स्कूल को 2 लाख रुपए दिए गए थे नॉन सैलरी बजट के हेड के अंडर कि वो प्रिंसिपल स्पेंड करे, लेकिन प्रिंसिपल को रेट्रीब्यूशन और नैब और अकाउंटेबिलिटी का डर लगना शुरू हो गया था कि उसने पैसे खर्च नहीं किए। उसने कहा मैंने चेने भी नहीं लेनी, टेबल भी नहीं लेने, ट्यूबलाइट भी नहीं लगानी, मुझे कोई आगे पकड़ लेगा और मैंने उसको इस्तेमाल नहीं करना। दैट आई मीन, एक तो पैसे अलॉट ज्यादा करें, बट पैसे अलॉट करने के बाद वो सेंट्रलाइज वे से पैसे ना स्पेंड करें। जो स्कूल लेवल प्रिंसिपल है उसको पता है उसके बच्चों को क्या बेहतर चीज चाहिए, एंड आई थिंक व्हेन दे आर गिवन द फ्रीडम टू डू सो, टीच फॉर पाकिस्तान ये डेमोन्स्ट्रेट टाइम एंड टाइम अगेन करता है कि जब स्कूल में कोई चला जाता है और उसको इम्प्रूवमेंट करने की चाह होती है और उसके पास पैसे होते हैं, तो they bring about great effect, right? और इतने ज़्यादा पैसों की जरूरत भी नहीं है। So I do think that it is going to be internal. ये World Bank शायद हमें ना बचा सके, UNICEF ना बचा सके, IMF ना बचा सके, this will have to be internal, no two ways about it.
Let me go to the floor. Sonan Ahmed. Sonan.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Okay, I have a couple of questions. I'll try to remain brief. So the first is just building upon the discussion that we've had so far. So we know about, there's a lot of work that Dr. Asim Khwaja has done at Harvard Kennedy. And, he's also talked about the fact that, there are sort of market mechanisms such as competition in the private sector. And he's actually demonstrated that even low-fee private schools, maybe not the 500 or 1,000 ones, but even if you go to, let's say, Educator or 2,000 or 3,000, or there is a lot better quality of delivery in those schools relative to the public sector. And we know that in Pakistan, we have political allocations and public sector education jobs, and merit is often compromised. So I think we do need to, realize that market mechanisms may not be perfect, but in terms of delivery, we do need to rely on the market, and the private sector needs to expand even further. And I think there's really no point that we should have public sector delivery of education. The government's role should obviously be truncated in the sort of regulation space rather than the sort of delivery space, because that leads to all kinds of problems in terms of how incentives work in the public sector, such as corruption and political allocation and so on. And the market, of course, solves some of these problems. That's the first point, that we need to work on expanding the private sector. And I don't think it's a job of the government to build schools, and the government needs to just focus on regulation. Okay, that's one point. The second point is that I understand that, we live in a country where access to education remains an issue, and we are focusing on that. And in that respect, edtech and technology is amazing, and we need this is a very efficient way to increase access to education, and that's sort of, I celebrate that technology in that sense. But in terms of returns to education, again, going back to sort of Gary Becker and sort of other people's ideas, well, opportunities for students in education, what will be we need to focus on what sort of opportunities these students have in terms of returns on this investment, in terms of, when they're getting education through online education. And so distance learning does create a lot of opportunities, but it sort of really cannot be a substitute for the kind of social capital and kind of labor market returns and opportunities it will get from, let's say, conventional elite universities, or even conventional sort of middle class elite, universities. Forget about the best ones. And so, and just a sort of related point is that a lot of social skills will be very difficult to transmit through online education. So for example, I'm a LUMS alumni. So when, you go to Lumen, for example, in Istanbul for a conference. And so a lot of these sort of skills are transmitted through these sort of, not just through sort of, it's just very difficult to transmit that kind of social capital through those online education systems without the opportunities that come with sort of a physical space and the social capital that comes with interaction with colleagues and so on. And the last point is that evaluation remains challenging in the online education system. So, recently there was a lot of controversy on the GRE sort of evaluation, whether you should have an online GRE test. And when I was in England, during my second year, they canceled all the exams because of COVID, even at a very good university in the UK, because there was an evaluation concern because of how do you evaluate, maintain, credibility and meritocracy in an online evaluation system. So these remain challenges in the sort of online education landscape. That's it.
Nan Saab, I think this is yesterday's problem. I'm not saying that edtech has solved all problems, but the pace at which we are moving as an industry and the impacts that we're beginning to have and we're beginning to value, the fact that we're having this conversation through Zoom, we have to look forward with a large system like Pakistan. EdTech, no matter how flawed it is today, will keep improving. So I don't think we really have to worry too much. Oh, is it better than physical and so on? The reality is we will never be able to scale up a physical system. And the reality is that in today's world, there is no education system in the world that does not rely intensively on technology. So I don't think we should worry too much. Oh, let's constrain EdTech because we have to prove the case. The case is being proved itself. Have you used ChatGPT? Did you hear of ChatGPT 6 months ago? I rest my case.
Yeah, I would like to also respond. So in theory, it sounds very, very good. And yes, private sector, like we are saying that they are responsible for outcomes and impact. We can't do that in government departments. So maybe we should have private sector do everything, but this is not politically possible, right? So we will always have a hybrid system. The investment that we've made in the physical infrastructure, the investment that we've made in the human resources are not going to go away. I also have looked at this problem in detail. And yes, private sector is more efficient. Yes, places like educators are today delivering better outcomes. But part of it is that, private sector today is better structured and better well managed. There is clear roles and responsibilities defined. There is, more regular tracking. EdTech technology actually solves a lot of those problems. And I think, at least in the cities, you will be surprised if you go in and meet some of our teachers. They are actually very, very competent, right? So it's wrong to paint all the teachers with one stroke and say, oh, public school teachers are not good and, private school teachers are always better. This is not the case. If you get better results in the private sector, it has to do with more structured pedagogy. It has to do with better discipline. There are a lot of, and frankly, it has a lot to do with the fact that people who can afford to attend private school are, sort of a different level of mental and physical health than people who are so marginalized that they have to go to rural schools. Like I said, in the urban areas, it is a lot of people choose to go to government schools even when they can afford to go to private schools. So, it's wrong to assume that all government schools are delivering bad education just because the national rural characteristics is so fine. So I urge you to look into that. EdTech solves some of those problems. Yes, ultimately, I agree that there is going to be a lot more dependence on private sector if we are to solve this problem, simply because they are able to invest. We will not have all the investment capability to be able to, cater to the growing number of children. So that's a very good reason for engaging the private sector and to keep on engaging them. But hopefully we will also be able to improve dramatically the learning outcomes that the public education system delivers. To your second question, I think that the world of education is changing. Now, I am not personally from the edtech industry, and the edtech industry is going to provide us with the solution. But there is room for us to get creative. You know, this factory school model where everybody has to go to school for 8 hours a day, like in a factory in the 1900s, just doesn't apply. We don't even work like that anymore. I am working for the ministry, but right now I am talking to you from my home office because I am working from home today. And I think everybody is sort of going through this transition that, you know, you spend some time in the office, but you don't have to be there all the time to be productive. In fact, I feel more productive working like this than if I am forced to go to some office in some building and sit there for 8 to 5. And if I leave at 4 o'clock or 3 o'clock, my boss asks me the next day, "Kidhar the tum? Kidhar jaldi nikal gaye the?" Bhai. So this method, I think it is right now the problem where we have 60 or 70 children packed into a class where, you know, most educationists agree that you should not have more than 30 students per class, can be easily solved. And it's up to the private sector to create these solutions and come to us. But if I was them, I would say, look, why don't you rotate the students? You know, why don't you have them do most of their learning online and come to the classroom and or go in field trips, you know, to the Smithsonian version of Pakistan, the museum, or things like that. Obviously, we all believe that, you know, you can't learn just sitting on the computer, right? We know that there are physical elements, there is, group activities, things like that you have to meet. But why do you need the structure of a classroom for that? So I think innovation is the need of the hour. We can't solve this problem by building more physical schools. We have to sort of look at creative solutions, and the solution is not to say that, okay, we are not going to build physical schools, so we are going to, you know, force everybody to sit and learn on the computer. That is also not the answer. There needs to be a human component. The question is, and again, it's not for me, but for the edtech industry to propose us the solutions, that can we build a rotating model? Can we build a model where the students come in and use these classes, you know, maybe 2 days a week? Like when I was in America, I was studying my engineering, and the most useful part of that whole it was not the professor's lecture. We never understood what he was talking about, but the TA session that happened twice a week was where we actually learned things. So maybe a model like that needs to be proposed. And you know, we need to stop away from following others and replicating others. We need to innovate our own model for us to succeed. Thank you.
जुल्फिकार साहब, बड़ी अच्छी बात आपने की. आई एग्री, इनोवेशन की जरूरत है और हम सब इसकी बात करते हैं. बट देखिए, जो रूल्स हैं वो तो हमें तंग कर रहे हैं. फॉर एग्जांपल, एचईसी ने रूल बनाया हुआ है. अब मैं हायर एजुकेशन की तरफ आ जाता हूं बिकॉज आई नो दैट बेटर, कि जी यूनिवर्सिटी के कैंपस में 13 एकड़ होने चाहिए और पता नहीं क्या क्या कुछ होना चाहिए. तो आई थिंक हमने ये भी नहीं सोचा कि एडटेक जो है, फॉर एग्जांपल एडटेक, व्हाट यू सेड जस्ट नाउ अपील्स टू मी, कि edtech should be disrupting the whole system. But we are still thinking of 30 kids in a classroom. We are still thinking of physical schools. We are still thinking of teachers. So, but I'd like to understand from all of you very quickly before we go, what is the level of disruption in edtech? Or is edtech just putting textbooks on the computer? Please tell us, what is the level of disruption? And आपने जो quadratic equation की बात की थी, am I still going to learn quadratic? मैंने तो formula रटा था, and I minus b plus whatever. वो मैंने आज तक मुझे उसकी समझ नहीं आई कि फॉर्मूला आया कहाँ से, बट मैंने रट लिया था. ठीक है, सेम थिंग फॉर डेरिवेटिव, मैंने रट लिया था dy dx is equal to whatever, but I never really understood what it was. So how is edtech going to A, disrupt the education system from the point of view of infrastructure, and B, from the point of view of student learning? For example, in some subjects I could go faster, in some subjects I could go slower, and I was sleeping in the subjects where I could go faster, and I was, you know, clinging on with my bare knuckles to stay on with the subjects that I was going slower. So iska bataiye, kya khayal hai? Ji, Mehboob, first you.
I think, first of all, edtech is the only way out. That, as Zulfiqar said, we can't keep building schools. We just don't have the means to do it. If the $9 billion that I'm talking about now that we need to spend, if we were to translate it into building physical solutions, it would be 4 times, 6 times more than that. So just from a financial point of view, and secondly, from the pace at which things are changing, edtech has to be a central part of the solution. Regarding disruption, I'll just give you one data point regarding what we do. On every child, for every minute the child spends on our system, we capture over 100 data points. Now we've developed an artificial intelligence system. We're trying to improve it. But the point is, if you look at the interactivity of technology with the child, the level of engagement, the level of knowledge, the level of data, and coming back through artificial intelligence, the level of engagement with the child, there is no level of what a teacher does or a school system does that can meet what edtech does. This is not to say the role of the teacher is not essential, but it is to say that we can massively improve learning and education, and it can only happen through a technology intervention.
But Mehboob, what is the role of the teacher in this intervention? Can we spread out the teachers, or do the teachers still have to sit there 6 hours a day talking, and do the teachers still have to take 20,000 copybooks a day? I mean, kya hai teacher ka role? And is my learning dependent on the teacher? Because I remember when I was learning, it really depended on the teacher. One year we had a good geography teacher, I was dead. Next year, I was very happy, glad, I learned a lot. The day I didn't have a good geography teacher, I suffered. Bataiye.
A teacher can help a lot, but I'll tell you like one experience we've had, games-based learning. Now, last year we had 600,000 kids in Pakistan who did amazing levels of engagement through games, So not only is the role of the teacher changing, also the role of the book is changing. The books are kind of dying out. I'm sorry to say, I love books.
Mehboob, hang on just a second. I want to bring in somebody very important. Neelam Hussain is here, Dr. Neelam Hussain of Grammar School. Neelam, can you please take the mic? Neelam has disappeared. Oh my God, that's terrible.
Maybe she is mute.
I don't know. She just raised her hand and she disappeared. Neelam, are you there?
Yes.
Okay, Neelam, go ahead. Neelam, go ahead.
I'm having a little problem here. If you can hear me, I can start talking.
We can hear you. We can hear you fine.
Okay. I am an educational researcher and I run schools and universities across Pakistan under the name of Lahore Grammar School Private Limited. Now, the universities are all London University programs. And I have 29 degrees at undergraduate and graduate level. Here I am. So I have to tell you something I've been doing. I found this talk fascinating. All your ideas are there. But I, as a practitioner and also as a researcher, have some suggestions after having learned from your points. First of all, I'm running what is an idea, a design idea, which is called the School of Education. Is it a school? No. Is it a building? No. What is it then? It is primarily an idea share with practitioners and participants in education. So, as you said, Zoom is absolutely a gift from heaven for that. And very often I'm sitting across the areas where I operate are Lahore, Karachi, Islamabad, Gujarat, Peshawar, and last but not the least is Quetta. Now, up distance sochiye kya hai? And we are running university. I personally am running those university programs. They are run by actual faculty. We are a recognized center. We are the largest I'm the largest provider of the London University programs, and they end even with a bar school teaching. How do you do it? You do it on an aspiration. You do it on a paradigm which uses desperate remedy. आप गवर्नमेंट का वेट करेंगे, आप वेट करेंगे फंडिंग का, आप कहेंगे शेयर कैसे करें. उसमें the only thing that has worked on an accelerated pace for me in doing this design is that the aspiration in educational paradigm change has to be desperate. And the nucleus has to be the person or the core group which manages that. Does it have to be perfect? Does it need a building? Does it need funding? Does it need permissions? No. You do it in an invisible flow. And that means what was the philosophy of this? The idea of the School of Education Design is to stay global and 21st century today, not wait for anything to come. And how have I done it? Very easily. You use the learner as a teacher, because the learner is not constricted at all. And particularly in the kind of schools I run, they are schools that are really on the top of the pyramid so far as educational facilities, aspiration linkages are concerned. That makes a very easy audience to teach. So what I did was got the faculty involved from preschool to university on global and research ideas. अब आप जो सारी बातें अभी कर रहे थे, edtech, etc., we are doing it through the learner. And what does the learner do? Well, this idea is derived from the primary schools that I run, which are the International Baccalaureate Primary Years Program. So they are very global. They use the learner as the teacher. So not all my schools have it, but 3 schools do. And at the top, I have the diploma program, then have the London University programs. I feel that the learner as a teacher is not even used by foreign universities. And it is the quickest fix in the world if you have the aspiration to create that design. And every aspiration we have, and I ask my students to go and research and come back. And they do presentations in seminars, in sections of the school, starting from grade 1 on the IB World Ideas, because the IB is a very global program. It looks at everything, at environment, at time, at space, where we are in place and time. How many curriculums ask this question in Pakistan? Where we are in place and time? We're always in some fray in Pakistan, in that year of failure and discontent. But if you look globally, and I would say through the cosmos, at time and space, from the age of 5, are you not a global learner? Does the Pakistani curriculum interrupt us? Hugely, hugely. Do we get interrupted? Not at all. Because this is not a curriculum, it's an ID bank. There's no booklet for it. There are no boundaries. But where do we assert it? We assert it by staying global, contemporary, as citizens of this planet Earth today. We have no geographical positioning. We have no ideological control. We have no limits to the search. And I cannot tell you what a wonderful journey it has been. In fact, I was just talking across Pakistan before, and I lost 10 minutes of your chat. And there was Quetta sitting there, Peshawar, and preschool and university programs. And आपने जो कहा Zoom के बारे में बिल्कुल दुरुस्त है. ये तो एक गिफ्ट है. और हमारे जैसे underdeveloped मुल्क में simultaneously मिलना और use ना होना. But where I will tell you, you will be obstructed again and again if you're working with government, is in the politics that go with it. Nobody has taken charge of the public sector. We are the 2nd most illiterate country in the world. Our population is growing at the speed of light. You will never solve any problem from the base of the pyramid, of the base of the problematic pyramid. You will only solve
apart
it.
from Zoom, how are you using edtech? Apart from Zoom, how do you involve edtech in your curriculum and in your learning?
What I have started 2 weeks ago is to ask the students. We suggested the chat GPT, and we suggested edtech, but since the learner is the teacher, we said, please, this is just a suggestion to stir your mind, to take you to a direction. What you need to do is to go as the learner. Nobody obstructs the learner. It's the teacher who obstructs the learner with their lack of know-how. But should you wait? How many of you think and speak like traditional Pakistani adults? How did you escape it? By becoming a learner yourself. Except for the missed years that Dr. Nadeem al-Haq just spoke about learning. Now, let me tell you a solution about what Nadeem said, that Some concepts are learned, without understanding through rote learning. Well, yes, they are. And I found to my horror that the SAT, GMAT, MDCAT, etc., were being taught erroneously in the market. And since I had a sample of students who took it from grade 9, I took them from grade 9 to graduate level, and I set up a department, which is not a formal department, which is really amalgam of thinking people. And we peeled SAT. I had not taken the SAT because I did, my degrees were from England, and then my master's was from the US, but I didn't need the SAT for that. What I want to say to you, we found that itna erroneously padhaya ja raha tha, including the Khan Academy, that it was laughable. We put it into the curriculum, and that means you are not building a building, you are keeping people under your supervision doing it. And we are peeling SAT from grade 9 to A2. We are not allowing students to take it without having taken it internally. There's a whole research design that I've created, and it has made the work extremely visible to us. Now, the first students who will take this will be next year. And that will be the baseline data for how SAT, because आप जो उधर से पढ़ के जाते हैं, वो amalgamate जब वेस्ट में होता है, आपको समझ नहीं आती 1-2 साल, क्योंकि आपने baseline में erroneously उस concept को पढ़ा होता है. The English in the SAT is English for specific purposes. Usko English कहना and making an O-level or A-level student feel that it is the English that you read at O and A levels. It's not that English. It is English for specific purposes and specific goals. और अगर वो आप specify करके पढ़ाते हैं, even at all the tutors for SAT were saying, look at the 2 answers, choose 2 which seem appropriate and tick 1. Now, is that learning? आप कहीं reapply कर सकेंगे बाद में, और आपने SAT करके जान छुड़ा के छोड़ दिया सब. So this, I'm saying that this is a struggle. I won't say anymore. It's your show. That it has to be taken personally, the problem solving by educators, and been done in a small.
नीलम ने बात की है, बड़ी डॉक्टर नीलम ने बात की है, बड़ी अच्छी बात की है कि it has to be learner based. और कज़िलबाश साहब जो आपने दिखाया था was very good, but quite frankly, जो Ministry of Education की बात आती है, उसमें हम टीचर्स बनाते हैं, हम स्कूल बनाते हैं, वर्ल्ड बैंक की एडवाइस होती है, टीचर स्कूल करिकुलम. What role will the learner play in this, Qazilbash sir? And your last words, because we close after this.
So first of all, I absolutely agree with what Dr. Neelam said, that something has to be urgent and important, both. It has to have a sense of urgency. There needs to be a distress, a pain around it, and needs to be high priority item for real disruptive innovation to happen. Otherwise, the system just keeps on producing incremental innovation. So the bad news or the good news, however you want to call it, is that we have reached that state. Our education rankings are now the lowest, among the lowest in the world. Our out of school population is among the highest in the world. So we have reached all those characteristics of what you would call a big problem, a big pain, which requires disruptive innovation. Now, how that disruptive innovation happens, whether, as I'm personally very fond of this, कि भाई physical school को आप rotation में इस्तेमाल करें. But I need the private sector to come up with a solution. So, the future education is a mix of, online learning, जो कि mostly handheld devices से होगी, and with some, field trips to computer labs and to also discussions in school. So I think that is the only way, there's a big disruption in education, but that physically is the only way we can accommodate, 100 million students. We just don't have the money to do it any other way. Secondly, it's not for me to solve the problem. I want to use this, my last words, as an open invitation to people like Dr. Neelam Hussain to join us in an advisory capacity and work on a theory of change that, essentially makes sense to all of us, because, student-oriented learning is a very good thing. I think everybody agrees that the IB model is is the next, is the future of education with the student oriented and all that. But we have to map it to the mental, nutritional, and psychological problems that exist in the marginal populations of our rural areas. And, it's not for me. Experts like Dr. Neelam and others will come up with a pathway. But I think, there needs to be some sort of nurturing of our, learner. And वो कहते हैं ना कि Plato ने कहा था कि democracy only works if you're educated. So इसी तरह, first you have to learn how to learn in order to be successful in the IB system. And while that works, I think in the middle class and in the urban environments, there is some work that needs to be done. And again, it's up to experts like Dr. Neelam to tell us to how to bridge that gap. So I want to end with a call. I've shared my email address. Anybody who wants to review the entire document, it's a 100-page strategy. I can sort of introduce themselves and ask them. I'm happy to, sort of share that strategy. And anybody who is interested, who has the credentials, who has the experience and the background to be part of the advisory committee, we are going to set them up at multiple levels. So please also reach out. Let's develop together a disruptive theory of change that solves this problem in less than 5 years. I personally don't believe, as I've said before, on one side, HSN College taught us perseverance, command, success. But I think if a problem is not solved in 5 years, it's not solved at all. So I'd like to end here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Haroon साहब बताइए कि हमारे पास इंटरनेट तो बहुत कमजोर है. मैं जिधर जाता हूँ मैं देखता हूँ इंटरनेट बहुत कमजोर होता है और क्या कहते हैं लैपटॉप्स और अब तो लंडे के लैपटॉप्स आ रहे हैं और लंडे के टैबलेट्स आ रहे हैं बिकॉज ड्यूटीज इतनी हाई है कोई ले ही नहीं सकते. Can you rely on mobile phones to educate kids or do you need devices? And should the government also think of, for example, एक चीज जो मैंने नहीं पूछी but last words पे आप कह सकते हैं, should the internet be a right and free to all kids? Or should it be charged and right now internet is very expensive. I pay 10,000 for my internet. Bataiye ji Haroon Saab, your last words.
Right, I'm going to base this on a lot of anecdotes that we've gathered over the course of the last 7 years. Yeah, पहला तो ये कि तलीमाबाद ने 4 साल पहले राजनपुर तहसील के बिल्कुल सिंध के बॉर्डर के साथ एक इलाका आता है जो कि मुझे भी नहीं पता था. ये फेडरली एडमिनिस्ट्रेड ट्राइबल एरिया सुलेमान किरथार माउंटेन रेंजेस की साइड पे. वहां पे 300 आउट ऑफ स्कूल लड़कियां थी जिन्होंने काफी सालों से स्कूल अटेंड ही नहीं किया था. और तालीमाबाद ने उनको ऑफलाइन टैबलेट्स पे ये सारा का सारा मटेरियल मल्टीपल जमातों का डाल के दे दिया. उनसे कहा कि आप घर पे रोज शाम को जब आ जाते हैं वापस खेतों से तो आप ईयरफोन्स लगाएं और जो मर्जी करना है करें, फेल करना है करें, नहीं पढ़ना ना पढ़ें, बट दिस इज जस्ट एन एक्सपेरिमेंट. 200 गर्ल्स टुक पार्ट इन दैट. उनके जो वालिदैन थे, खास तौर पे जो फादर से बड़े अपोज थे, लड़कियों की शादियां हो गई, आप कैसी चीजें कर रही हैं, वो कितने 6-7 सालों से स्कूल नहीं गई. और फिर हम साल बाद उधर गए उस इलाके के अंदर. साल बाद जाके मैं ये पता चला कि नॉट ओनली हैड द, और ये दिस गोज बैक टू डॉक्टर नीलम्स पॉइंट ऑफ द एजेंसी ऑफ द लर्नर, क्योंकि ना सिर्फ लड़कियों ने से पढ़ना शुरू कर दिया था, लोकल जो मस्जिद थी वहां पे फजर और जोहर के दरमियान एक बहुत बड़ा गैप होता था. मौलवी साहब ने मर्दों को बाहर फेंक दिया था और फजर से लेकर जोहर तक के गैप में वो लड़कियां गैदर करती थी उस मस्जिद के अंदर, और उस मस्जिद के अंदर जो उन्होंने पढ़ा होता था वो डिस्कस करती थी. उनकी पुरानी टीचर थी, वो उनकी, आपने टीचर का रोल पूछा था ना, वो फैसिलिटेटर के तौर पे उधर आ गई थी. वो लड़कियों को जहां फंस जाती थी वो गाइड कर देती थी और उसके बदले में लड़कियां जो है जाके स्कूल में झाड़ू पोछा या जो उनकी सफाई करनी होती थी, टेबल सेट करने होते थे, उनमें उसकी मदद कर देती थी. ये साल के अख्ताम पे वी गो देयर, 200 में से 194 गर्ल्स had not only obliterated the 6th grade which they were supposed to study. हमने उनको टैबलेट पे आगे का मटेरियल भी दिया होता. 6ठी 7वीं कुछ तो 8वीं के मवाद में पहुंच गए थे, या उनको हमने कोई रिस्ट्रिक्शंस नहीं दी थी. एंड they went far ahead. 95% of them had passed their state, आखिर में हुकूमत ने इम्तिहान लिया था, 95% of them passed the state exam. उसके अलावा जो लड़कियों के बाप थे ना, जो सबसे बड़े ओपोजिंग फैक्टर्स थे, वो वापस आके बताने लगे कि जब गंदम काश्तकारी होके वापस जाती है ना तो उनको हमेशा स्विंडल करता था. मिडिल मैन जो गंदम की तोलना जो होता था वो गलत करता था. लड़कियां जाके ना अपने बाप के साथ मैथमेटिक्स और पूरी कैलकुलेशन करके उसे गंदम बिकवाती थी, और बीच में जितना फ्रॉड हो रहा होता था उसकी लेयर खत्म की, और बाप के साथ उसकी काम में लड़के से ज्यादा लड़कियां मदद करना शुरू हो गई. And the fathers in 1 year had become the most passionate advocates for their girls continuing their education. Now, अगेन इसी तरह तालीमाबाद का एक हमें 2 साल पहले पता चला, हमारी एक मोबाइल ऐप थी जो बच्चों के लिए इस्तेमाल होती थी, उसका एक बहुत बड़ा यूज केस कैंसर अस्पताल में था. कैंसर अस्पताल से हमें कॉल आई, हम कैंसर अस्पताल गए. जब बच्चों को कैंसर होता है, और ये 5 से 15 साल के बच्चे थे, और इनको रेडिएशन कीमोथेरेपी ट्रीटमेंट लगना शुरू होती है, तो ये आउट ऑफ स्कूल हो जाते हैं. हमने कभी इनको आउट ऑफ स्कूल कंसिडर ही नहीं किया ना, और ये बच्चे पूरा दिन नढाल रहते हैं क्योंकि उनको रेडिएशन लगी होती है. तो वहां पे एक बच्चे ने इस्तेमाल करना शुरू किया तालीमाबाद की ऐप को, दूसरे ने इस्तेमाल करना शुरू किया, करते करते पूरा वार्ड उस पर लग गया. राइट, जब इनमें से जो बच्चे सर्वाइव किए और स्कूल वापस गए ना, तो इनकी टीचरें अस्पताल आई और कहती हैं ट्यूटर कौन सा रखवा के दिया था, उसको हमने हायर करना है एज ए टीचर. तो उन्होंने कहा यार ट्यूटर तो कोई नहीं रखवा के दिया था, मोबाइल पे बच्चे खेल रहे थे. एट द एंड ऑफ द ईयर अस्पताल ने अब अपना एक पूरा वार्ड जो है ना, उधर से बेड निकाल के उधर टीवी स्क्रीन लगा के टैबलेट्स लगा के बच्चों को इनेबल कर दिया है. वहां पे बच्चों का स्कूल रखता है रात 12 बजे से 11 बजे से लेके आगे ऑनवर्ड्स, जब उनको व्हेन दे हैव द एनर्जी टू बी एबल टू कंज्यूम एंड लर्न, और उनके साथ एक फैसिलिटेटर होता है टू आंसर योर क्वेश्चन ऑफ टीचर का रोल क्या है. नाउ आइसोलेशन में तो स्टोरीज और कहानियां बहुत प्यारी लगती हैं, राइट, बट इन ऑर्डर फॉर दिस टू स्केल, हुकूमत ने भी रिसेंटली फैक्ट्रीज लगाई हैं स्मार्टफोन्स की. गधा गाड़ियों पे स्मार्टफोन्स बिकते हैं. जो हमने अपने इस दौर में फोन इस्तेमाल किया था ना, एनगेज N91, ये गधा गाड़ी पे आते हैं और 1200-1300 रुपए के फोन बिक रहे होते हैं. सो एज लॉन्ग एज ये मार्केट को इतना डिस्टर्ब नहीं कर सकते, आप इंटरनेट फ्री कर दें और फोन मुफ्त के बांटते हैं, बिकॉज इतने पैसे तो हमारे पास है नहीं. बट हमने अपने आंखों से औरतों को अपने दुपट्टों के अंदर से ना 10-10 रुपए खोलते हुए देखा इन ऑर्डर टू बाय अ स्मार्टफोन फ्रॉम वो जो गधा गाड़ी बंदा लेके आया होता था. मेक देम चीप इनफ दैट दे आर अफोर्डेबल. और पाकिस्तान में 1-2 प्लांट्स भी लग गए हैं चीप स्मार्टफोन्स मैन्युफैक्चर करने के. इंटरनेट आपको 10,000 का पड़ता होगा, बट ग्लोबली अगर आप देखें तो पाकिस्तान इज वन ऑफ द चीपेस्ट प्लेसेस इन द वर्ल्ड टू यूज इंटरनेट. मैं यूएस में अपना खाना स्किप करता था $30 का एक प्लान लेने के लिए, यहाँ पे $3 में मैं एक स्मार्ट कार्ड ले लेता हूँ, उससे मेरा पूरा महीना चल जाता है. राइट, एंड सो इंटरनेट को और हम डिक्रीज कर सकते हैं, बट द मेजर प्रॉब्लम इज दैट ऑफ डिवाइस एक्सेसिबिलिटी. उसके अंदर सस्ता इनफ बनाएं, बट मार्केट को डिस्टॉर्ट करने की कोशिश हम करते हैं जहां पे भी डिजास्टर्स इफेक्ट्स होते हैं. लेट मेक इट चीप इनफ, let the market roll it out. And these examples show, right, कि ये जब आपने basic access enable कर दिया, अपनी जिनको आप सर्व करते हैं ना, उनको बेवकूफ कभी भी नहीं समझना चाहिए. They will figure out a way, and they have time and time again we've seen figure out a way. So I am hopeful कि अगर ये दो तीन मैक्रो लेवल चीजें गवर्नमेंट सेट कर लेती है, तो this is a revolution waiting to happen.
Ji Mehboob, pull it together. Go ahead. Your views and all this stuff. Go ahead. Last word.
I think, Rumi used to, every Friday after the prayer, he'd read the Masnavi, and he'd start by saying, don't think that the paths to holiness are that difficult. To work with God is easy, not difficult. And the reason I'm bringing this up is that we can either look at this as a very complex problem in which the government has to do a lot of engineering. And I think if we look at it as that kind of problem, government hasn't been great at education. So the complexity of edtech is massive. So I think the government really needs to think about setting some priorities. And as people have been saying, people educate themselves, the self-learners is much more potential than there is. We were staggered that 400,000 kids got financially certified by State Bank by their own. They did it themselves using their phones and laptops last year in 1 year. So, I think if the government were to focus on the key issues, which I think have been identified, one is the whole device issue, the second is the whole financing issue, and third is what are the goals and curriculum of education. Focus on these three things and promote the private sector. Don't try to engineer too much, engineer less, and engineer on the more essential things that are blocking Pakistan to take off. I believe that the children of Pakistan and the people of Pakistan have already invested $7 billion in education. There's no problem in them investing another $9 billion. Just create the right environment where they can buy devices cheaply, they can get them financed over 10 years, and the private sector will figure out the rest of it. You don't have to tell us what learning management systems to use or what technologies, content to use, and so on. So do less, but focus in on the key things. And if I'm wrong, focus on what you think is the right thing, but don't focus on 20 things, focus on 3.
There you go, ladies and gentlemen. We've talked to 3 pioneers in education. And it's been a wonderful webinar. And thank you, Neelam, for joining us. Neelam is a treasure. She's, mashallah, the few women in Pakistan have changed the private sector education map. And they did it, I remember, purely having fun and in their own backyards, and now become a big chain. But Zulfiqar Saab, thank you very much. I think the message that comes out very clearly is the message that resonates very well with PIDE. हम लोग यही कहते हैं कि हुकूमत ये नहीं कि हुकूमत को नहीं होना चाहिए, हम ये नहीं कहते कि मार्केट को नहीं होना चाहिए, पर हुकूमत और मार्केट को मिलकर चलना चाहिए। और हुकूमत को सिर्फ अपना रोल क्लियरली होना चाहिए, और वो रोल लीडरशिप का होता है। ज्यादातर हुकूमत का रोल लीडरशिप का ये नहीं कि सब काम करें, अगर वो लीडर ठीक हो और लीडर के साथ फाइनेंसिंग ठीक करवा दे और बाकी लोगों को इनोवेट करने के माहौल दे दे, एक तरीकाकार दे दे, तो काम खुद ही ठीक हो जाता है। एंड माशाल्लाह, आई थिंक यू डिजाइन्ड अ गुड पॉलिसी टू डू दैट. एंड Mehboob and Haroon, I think your firms are firms of the future, and I certainly hope that one day you will disrupt the education paradigm altogether in this country, because we really need, I mean, हमें शॉर्टकट चाहिए। हमने बहुत इंतजार कर लिया, 75 साल, 2 जनरेशन हम जाया कर बैठे। एक जनरेशन सोची जाए तकरीबन 30 साल की जो वर्किंग लाइफ से, तो 2 जनरेशन हमें जाया करनी है। We can't afford to waste any more generations. We have to put this on fast track. We have to move the needle very, very fast. But if I could help it, if the government would listen to me, I would declare it a national emergency, stop road building, stop all the other stuff, and start focusing on education. If we start focusing on education, for 20 years, we'll change the paradigm. We'll change the face of Pakistan. We'll change everything. Thank you very much, folks. I'm always appreciative of you people taking out the time. I know you're busy. Thank you very much for helping us. All the best, Ji. Khuda Hafiz, Haroon, Zulfiqar Saab, Mehboob Saab. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes.